Regional Qualifiers Las Vegas was a bit of a travesty. We were all sort of hoping that Ezreal and Aurora Misfortune's successes in Bologna were similar in implications to Annie's wins in the Origins meta. Proof that the Eastern meta better reflected the rigidity of their preferred best-of-1 format rather than the actual state of the game and its intended multi-round design. While Draven was by far the most consistent top-tier deck in the format, Bologna indicated that there were more diverse options and playstyles available to tournament grinders. Or so we hoped. That hope was quickly dashed as reality and probability reasserted itself, and Draven's gargantuan Day 2 conversion rate translated into a monopoly of top results in Las Vegas. Granted, this wasn't really a surprise to anybody paying attention. There's a thin silver lining from Vegas still. It was ultimately mid-range Draven on top, with the muscularity of the Darius, Brynherd, and Ferris Forerunner package coming out ahead of the Miracle strategy that basically draws half of the deck in a turn to always have the right cards at the right time. But the fact of the matter remains that if you want a chance at winning a regionals at all, you are basically piloting the same fundamental strategy as everybody else. You are going to be a purple player. By design, every color is supposed to have an advantage over the others in one or two ways. Order or yellow is a better direct killer and resists kills with death knell. Body or orange gets big bodies and accelerated tempos, so on and so forth. Chaos or purple's privilege, however, is along three factors, one of which doesn't actually seem intended on part of the designers. Privilege 1. Purple has the best and cheapest card draw in the game, as exemplified by Called Shot and Stacked Deck, allowing it to stack both quantitative and qualitative card advantage over decks now running purple. Given that card advantage in TCGs is a fundamental strength, this alone already makes the color a top-tier tournament consideration. Privilege 2. Purple has the best and cheapest movement in the game, with Ride the Wind, Flash, and Fight or Flight representing some of the most flexible options available, with Ride the Wind being uniquely powerful in how it allows out-of-turn scoring. While Body is noteworthy for its ability to lay on extra rounds of attack within its own turn, its action economy advantages are much more linear and straightforward than Chaos's, and it notably has more difficulty disengaging from bad positions. It is rare for card games to have such an emphasis on zone positioning like Riftbound does. Subsequently, it would not necessarily surprise me to learn that the designers didn't intend for this advantage to be as overwhelmingly important as it is. But in fact, this means that purple has two privileges that fundamentally define the game itself at levels that bigger numbers or graveyard gimmicks don't reach. For Body or Orange to be a tempo color that loses the foot rates to what is on its face a more control-oriented stay-out-of-trouble color is probably an oversight. But not as much of an oversight as the third privilege, having the best removal in the game. Now, I'm certain this wasn't intended, as there are already two colors that are much more blatantly intended to be the removal-based specialists. Red by targeted damage, and yellow by just outright burying bodies. Other colors have forms of crowd control as well, but they are intentionally more conditional. Orange requires a might advantage to not simply kill your unit in the trade. Green's stun gimmick often forces a recall instead of a wand fight, and blue's might sapping mechanic is powerful, but can't actually remove a threat without external assistance, at least in the form of a single point of damage from elsewhere. Purple should technically be on the weaker side as well. The only way for it to permanently remove anything is to add the temporary tag in past turn. And Spout's mechanic means that the opposing player can still replay major threats and may even thank them for the opportunity to reuse a comes into play trigger. Yet Riftbound is a heavily tempo-based game. Just as the ability to move and disengage freely to maintain tempo makes purple inherently strong, the ability to remove a threat from a fight regardless of how permanent it is a distinct advantage in its race to 8. So what happens then when you give the most mobile color access to reaction speed, might agnostic removal? What should be expected when the premier color of card advantage is able to draw and use Rebuke at damn near any time? Spirit Forge and some is the era of purple privilege. Granted, there are some ways to work around the purple privilege problem. Movement ceiling effects are very strong answers to a core purple competency. Valmos Lair and Minotaur in the red deck, as well as green's Charm or Blitzcrank grab effects, allows the opposing player to force fights that the Chaos deck was trying to avoid. On the farthest end of the scale, 12 Ruined Volibear Imposing is an absolutely gargantuan threat that only worsens the situation for the Chaos player if they try to run from the fight. Similarly, no amount of card advantage is going to help if the cards in hand can't be played, which is why the mid-range Draven list is noteworthy for running Brynhir Thundersong, and why orange decks with any level of success are running the untargetable Ruin Runner. And that's it. Ironically, the actual best answer for purple is more purple. A timely invert timelines or even a rebuke invert combo turns a Miracle deck's prep against itself, while Hard Bargain actually steals the title of best counterspell away from green by being universally applicable without wind walls restrictive to power cost. Even purple's units are among the best at preventing purple from playing, with Overzealous Fan and Vex as standouts and making unwanted interactions much more costly, and Vex in particular allows for her player to win the mirror match by being that much more efficient in spell slinging, allowing for discount rebukes that don't threaten to slow down its deck's tempo. Unfortunately, this means that there aren't currently available deck building answers to purple's massive meta-defining dominance. But the thing that works do point the way towards anti-privileged designs that we need to see in future sets. But first, let's talk about taxes. A tax effect is any context where it's possible to do the thing you want to do, but the cost of doing so gets steeper the more you try to do it, like how if you run deeper into a briar patch, the more you bleed out. The least energy-intensive way to deal with a taxing situation is to not deal with it, choosing to go elsewhere, and losing out on wherever is currently getting taxed. That kind of soft defense is best exemplified by blue decks in the status quo. Ari, whether as a legend or as her blue champion, makes it very difficult to fight into her position by virtue of sapping the might of enemy units that move towards her. And the more units you cram into the fight, the more effective her legend ability becomes. More commonly and more easily found outside of blue, Shield does the inverse, adding might to defending units for the same end effect of making fights against them too taxing. All that's to set up the claim that there aren't enough taxes on non-combat interactions. Divine Judgment and Invert Timelines are the only cards at current time to incur a cost for developing big hands. And while Valmos Lair and Minotaur do exemplify anti-movement tech, neutralizing everything but Ride the Wind, it's very easy to argue that they're too symmetrical at current time. Death Knell cards aren't exactly impacting enough yet to justify leaving units to die at Valmaw, and leaving Draven extra card advantage, even for the opportunity to steal a kill off of him in turn. So there are ultimately two answers to the purple privilege problem. Number one, print more counter cards. They don't need to be particularly powerful. In fact, they shouldn't be, as the point is to tax interactions, not punish the player for engaging with the game's structure at all. They also don't need to be particularly powerful to get really annoying, as perhaps best exemplified by the fact that the Magic the Gathering card Ristic Study, a common card printed in 2000, is now worth about $55 on the market at its cheapest. And all it does, literally all it does, is lets its controlling player draw a card if an opposing player plays a spell and doesn't pay 1 extra mana. To a lay player, an extra card in hand or paying 1 extra mana doesn't seem that exciting. For anybody with TCG experience but not Magic, I can hear the blood rushing out of your face. Forcing a deck off its curve just to maintain card parity, especially in a tempo-centric game design, is exactly akin to getting nickeled and dimed to death while your opponent is giving freebies like a stereotypical Nepo baby. We don't need Ristic Study and Riftbound, but we can definitely afford to have more and cheaper Volibears and Minotaurs running around. But unless the next couple of sets just outright inundates us with purple counters, that still leaves the card alone at the peak of Mount Everest, while everybody's struggling to make it out of the foothills. So the second answer may be necessary, and it's one that nobody wants to see if at all possible. Bans are not to be taken lightly. Pragmatically, from a publisher's standpoint, nobody wants to invalidate the appeal of a product by removing it from competitive play. Vice versa is true for players too, who really don't want to see the day that the $100 per Kaisa they paid for at the height of Origin's popularity turned into cents on the dollar at best. Yet like in medicine, triage is sometimes necessary. The health of the game is the most important consideration, and whether through excessively pushed design or overlooked emergent factors, it sometimes happens that complex games spit up unwanted interactions. In fact, it's likely that the more interestingly complex the game, the more frequently these failsafes occur. The more agency a game gives its players, the more that agency is naturally pushed towards the most optimized advantages, and thus a more centralized metagame appears. The easiest ban target is probably going to be called Shot. While there are a vanishingly few handful of purple decks that don't necessarily want zero energy card draw, its ability to dig 4 deep for the right answer the moment the opponent passes priority over to you makes it exceptionally powerful, and very nearly ubiquitous at this point. This won't necessarily shake purple off its current throne at the top of the metagame. Stack deck isn't quite as powerful, but still does plenty. And Draven's leader ability is frankly busted for how freely it nets you card advantage for basically playing the game as intended. That makes him the second potential target. Though rather than outright banning a leader and thus invalidating the entire deck archetype, I think we can take a page from another game's book here as well. A few years ago, Blue-Black Sakazuki was at the top of the One Piece meta for similar reasons, overwhelming card advantage and allowing for the right answers to the right situation pretty much at will, causing him to dominate multiple tournaments' top 4 standings. The solution Banda came up with was rather drastic. The leader card was replaced with a weakened alternative distributed for free at locals that effectively ended Sakazuki's reign. Now, we don't necessarily need to shoot Draven in both kneecaps as well to render the metagame more hospitable overall to other legends, but replacing it with an eroded version that limits the scope of his ability is certainly something that can be lived with. Perhaps making it so that he only gets the extra card if an enemy unit dies in the fight he's participating in, negating the fight or flight or rebuke interactions in his status quo, while still preserving his identity as a snowballing fighter. As for when these hypothesized bans should occur, not right now. As you are hearing this, the new set's already get its spoiler season rolling, and the design and testing phase for the set after Vendetta is probably wrapping up, so we have some time to see if these are just issues with the limited initial card pool and something that's already on the designer's minds as they laid out pipeline plans for the year. But if the purple privilege problem continues through the Unleashed meta, then yes, it's probably time to put some cardboard on the chopping block.